What is it that you do?
My name is Tonino. I'm pretty much a regular citizen, I start playing around with electronics and coding in Fab Labs. So I come from biology at the very beginning, so it was really not related to my training. It was more like because I enjoy music and music production. I want to kind of make my own musical instrument, and so I start trying to do them myself using Arduinos.
Okay, and so you started messing around with Arduinos, and what kind of stuff do you do with Arduinos then?
Well, with Arduinos, it's not really good for making sounds. It's not powerful enough, but you can definitely play around MIDI and make MIDI controllers pretty easily. So on the internet, you can find a lot of very nice videos on how to make several MIDI controllers. It could be with pads, knobs, faders, whatever. There is a very nice channel called Notes and Volts, in which you have several tutorials and amazing projects. As for myself, so I have with me today two projects that I thought would be maybe worth showing. One is a small device that allows you to connect to any kind of object that conduce electricity. So an apple or a plant, and then with conductance, like with touch, it is going to become touch sensitive, and it will send MIDI signals according to how you touch it. And the other one,
before you go on, like
sure.
the Arduino itself though, like what is that, like what's on a basic level, before you go into the details of what you've managed to build with it?
Okay, so an Arduino is, I can show you one here. This is an Arduino Nano. So it's pretty much, it's a microcontroller. So you have a chip that kind of make calculation. You can code it with that very simplified C++ language that is named Arduino, just like the chip. And you have several input and outputs that you will actually set, and you will say in the code, you will tell them how to behave. So you can have information coming in and information going out. For example, a pretty popular project with Arduino is actually the weather station. So you plug in sensors that will detect temperature and humidity. And you can say that if temperature is too high, Arduino, please switch LED, a red LED on, or if the temperature is too low, please switch on a blue LED.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to use. The code is fairly simple as well. So it has been a great success, and it's usually a very popular item in Fab Labs.
Okay. And is it similar to Raspberry Pi then? Maybe people are more familiar with Raspberry Pis. Do you know about those as well?
So I wouldn't go too much into detail because I don't know much, but from what I understood, I haven't really messed around with Raspberry Pi yet. Raspberry Pi is really a tiny computer.
Yeah.
Arduino is a tiny microcontroller, which is fairly different. One can run on Linux, and so you can run many apps based on blah 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 that other developers have done and so on. So you can go much more in depth. Earlier I was saying that Arduino is not good, for example, for music to make synthesizer, just because they can't process so much information. A Raspberry can, because it's a tiny computer, and it has enough power. It has like gigabytes of memory and so on and so on. It's really like you can do plenty. You are pretty limited with Arduino, and that's why MIDI is great, because it's 1 byte signal, and so all the information are contained in 1 byte every time. Just like the note you play or the velocity or whatsoever. So that the Arduino is really capable of doing it. So you can control things like a Korg or a Yamaha piano, or you can directly control your computer and play with Ableton and so on.
Yeah.
So it's more about controlling than producing the sound, and so that would be, I would say, the difference between the two of them.
Okay, cool. And so you were just about to talk about some of the projects you were working on. Why don't you? Why did you introduce those for us? They seem pretty cool.
So I think I have talked about the first one already.
Yeah.
That was this one. That was actually the Apple machine you were mentioning in the previous video. So yeah, it's you plug an apple or a plant or any object, and then when you touch it, the electric signal is transformed in MIDI informations, and then the information is sent to a synthesizer and it plays notes. And the second one is a bit messier.
Okay, wow.
It's a tiny keyboard here and many switches. And so you use the MIDI keyboard for playing a root note, for example C, and you use the switches to choose which other note you're gonna play. So the thought, the original idea was to make more easier to explore chords. So usually we always play 3 notes chords. Yeah. But with this one, you can choose to play the root note and then a minor third and then a fifth and a 7, a 9th and an 11 and see how it sounds. Or you can just choose to not play the third and play just the root note, the fifth and the 6th and see what kind of chords it gives. So it was really like you only push one button and you get really complex chords in the end. And that was all the idea of it. And that's version 1. It needs a lot of improvement, but that's what it was about at the beginning.
Like what kind of improvement you hoping to add to it, or?
Well, after spending hours just like making all the soldering and making all the switch and so on, I just realized that it was really not understandable. And so basically you really do not easily understand which notes are activated or not. Yeah. So just to make a simple 3-note chords, it's a mess because you don't really know which one is activated or not. So it needs a lot of visual feedbacks as well that is not present yet.
More user interface, user experience kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that is. It's barely usable. It's functional, but it's not usable. And
I made a video last week about talking about just the basic introduction of UI. I feel like it's something that when we start doing projects, it's something we kind of tend to forget about until the very end, and then we realize, oh wait a minute, no one's going to understand this.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. I made a friend play with it, and it was like, well, that sounds great, but I can't do nothing with it. So we have a lot of we have a lot of things to do with it, which implies 10 times more soldering.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, it was the beginning because I want as well to add another part with the circular fifths on top to really. The idea is really to go deep into the music theory and try to escape the poor and sad, 4 chords chain with always the same 3 notes chords that you can hear in many songs. So that was the idea.
You should check out, start looking up jazz sheet music. You can get a lot of jazz sheet music comes with like the chords written on top. And you can get some interesting sequence ideas maybe, I don't know. Maybe if you had like a switch that just like switches style or chord pattern, I don't know. I don't know how complex you're going to be making this thing.
Well, it's like what I had in mind would be pretty complex because it would be like something to have a circular fifths to play with music theory, like how to actually make chords progression.
Yeah.
then it would be to actually play with the chords themselves. So
Yeah.
once you have like a basic chords like C7 or whatsoever, how you can actually tweak it to have a bit disturbing or new sounds, and then we need a sequencer to actually try them out and see how it goes. There is very good mobile application apps that does it, but I would really enjoy having a controller that does it for your studio. I feel like it's not really fun to play around apps. It's nice to have like a real thing.
Have you ever heard of? I know this is your DIY project, but
yeah,
have you ever heard of ChordBot? It's a friend of mine actually from the last podcast, Adrian. He got one of these ChordBots, and it does something very similar to what you're talking about, but I think it does a lot of that, like cycling through chords, and it's great if you don't have an intuition for adding ninths and 13ths onto things. But
so is that an object? It's a music instrument.
It's a synth. Well, not a synth. I guess it's a MIDI controller, as far as I'm aware. And I don't have one myself. I just played around with it, and I found it like just coming from doing some jazz piano myself. It was actually a lot of fun to play with. But I think maybe if you can make something that's even a bit more intuitive, it'd be really cool. But maybe just look it up and see. Maybe it can inspire you to add some features.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. So, are you able to demo anything there for us, or?
Yeah, I might. Everything is ready actually.
Okay, cool.
All right, so I need to make a few plugs and switch on a few stuff as well. All right. So now this plant is plugged into it, and of course it's having some problem again. So yeah, that's it. So if I don't touch it, it's a very low notes, and if I'm touching it, the more I'm touching it, the higher the pitch is. And that's pretty much it. I'm not sure, I'm gonna record it just to see. So you get a very nice MIDI signal.
And so you're playing the synth your synth is on Ableton, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you're passing MIDI signals. How are you passing the MIDI from your Arduino to your Ableton?
Just with a USB cable.
Okay. Do you have any interim software or anything like that, or?
So to be really technical, Arduino come in different. I'm gonna just stop the sound. Arduino comes with various different models. You have the Arduino Uno and Nano, and the only communication protocol they know is UART, serial something. And so you need to have a small software called hairless MIDI serial bridge something that actually transform the signal from the Arduino into MIDI for the computer. But you could also directly use a small MIDI plug and have it solder on the board that would go into a regular synthesizer.
Yeah.
And if you have other kind of Arduino, like the Arduino Leonardo or the Arduino, I think it's Pro Micro, then they have a chip inside that actually having real USB. It's not like USB just for communication. It's using USB protocols, and you can have directly MIDI USB information
okay.
transfer without using a bridge software in between those two.
I see.
Sadly, I only have Arduino Nano right now, so I'm using a converter.
Okay. But
That's it.
yeah, that's cool. If someone wants to get started with this, with building their own Arduino stuff, microcontrollers,
Yeah.
what would you recommend they should start with?
With patience and a lot of readings, I would say, because most of the time, so I remember for the stories that one time I have lost, I would say, a full afternoon, an entire afternoon just trying to make the MIDI works around, and it's because I haven't read well the documentation. One line was just explaining what mistakes I was doing and how I should do it differently.
Right.
But because I was always reading very fast, every time I skipped that information, and I spent really too much time on it. It was depressing. So it's most likely when you start Arduino, you won't be very good at it. And that's what's good with Arduino. There is a huge community that have developed so many libraries and so on. The MIDI libraries for Arduino is just incredible. It does everything. So you don't have to be very good to use snippets of codes from here and there and just adapt them for your project. Actually, the project with the plants has been found on instruct tables. I can have in the link to the video. I can send the link to the instructable to actually make a singing plant machine.
Sure.
With the circuit and so on. So you will have information a bit everywhere on how to do it, and then people actually contribute. So this guy has done this plant machine, but he was not using MIDI signal. So actually, I took his work and I implemented MIDI into it.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of my duty when I'm done with it to actually share back to the community. Oh, you can also use it for doing a MIDI instrument.
Right. It's an open source community, right? So everything is
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is open source. So yeah, I would say like if you
there it goes.
Yeah, I couldn't help touching the plant. If you want to get started, just like buy one and buy a few components, very easy one, like a few buttons, few LEDs, and maybe a few sensors, a few motors, just to get a hang on how it works and like inputs and outputs and so on. And very easily, one try, one attempt after another, you will have more ideas flowing in, and many projects are documented on the internet and so on. And another advice would be maybe don't do it by yourself. Do it yourself, but not all by yourself. Just there is, as I said, many communities, and there is places, hackerspace, there is Fab Labs, and maybe computer clubs and so on in university and so on. So just go to those places. Usually people are very welcoming and they're happy that someone else joined for having a project, because it's not because you don't know how to do it that the project is not great and interesting for others, and they will help you out going forward.
Cool. Yeah, some good advice there. All right. Anything you want to add before we go, Tonino? Anything you want to?
Don't think so. I would say no. I have not much to add. Just like get one, play around, have fun, and you know how you usually when you buy MIDI controllers, it's usually great, but it doesn't do everything you would like it to do. Well, that's the occasion to actually go one step further and design something that is really fitting your need as a creator and a musician or a producer or an artist in general. So it's worth investing some time in it. It's very rewarding at the end. That's what I would do. I would say.
Yeah. All right. Anywhere people can follow you or anything like that, or?
Yeah, so I haven't really started anything about tech.
Yeah.
I haven't documented anything yet, but I have an Instagram about drawing called Tonino Readsaurus, where I post few drawings, and well, maybe one day I will post some music as well, but not there yet.
Yeah.
And that's it, pretty much. A LinkedIn
Okay.
as well.
Cool.
Very cool, right?
Great. All right. Cheers to Nino for coming on. It was great hearing about your projects, and I'd actually, when you finish that chord controller thing you have going, I'd really like to see it in action. That's really cool.
Yeah, I would be very happy to see it in action too.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you, Shane, for having me.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks to Nino.
Ciao.